Friends, in a moment, you're going to hear me jump on with my daughter, Elle, and the author of The Wild Robot, Peter Brown. And friends, I'm so excited for you to listen to this interview for a couple of different reasons. First, when I was a little girl and I was learning to love to read, in 6th, 7th, 8th grade, I loved the Goosebump series and R.L. Stine. My mom took me to go see R.L. Stine at one point in person. And I remember that meeting being so transformational for me because I remember meeting this person and just thinking, oh, he's just a person, just like a human being like I am. And if he can write, then I could be a writer one day. And it started to get me out of some of my self-limiting beliefs and shift my mindset a bit. And my daughter came home with this book, The Wild Robot. And I remember her laughing and crying and talking to me about the book and just how emotional and how much of a gift this book was in her life. And that's who we're interviewing next, Peter Brown. And if you haven't read the Wild Robot series yet, you absolutely have to. It's just so deep. It's so profound. It's so spiritual without saying it's spiritual. Just a beautiful way to show kids how we need one another as human beings. So we're going to dive into this interview. I also just wanted to thank everybody so much and give you an update. Elle is going to have the back surgery. The doctor said he'd like to see that within the next 2 to 6 months, but we have to go out to New York City in order to be able to schedule that surgery date. And that'll be at the end of July that we'll be out there. So I just wanted to thank you for praying for her and to ask for those continued prayers that everything just goes really smooth for her this year with the surgery. And it's a lot to kind of be away from school for a while, but I just so appreciate your prayers and I just wanted to say thank you. And I also wanted to let you know we've got a lot of different things coming up. If you are interested in working with me in some capacity, I would love that. We have another Angel Reiki School that's going to be happening in person. We also have one starting online. If you want to join the Angel Reiki School to develop your mediumship, energy healing abilities, and also to become an angel messenger yourself. Friends, there's never been a better time or a time where it's more needed in this world than right now. We also have the couples retreat coming up the very last weekend of July. We still have a lot of openings for that. If you're interested in that, we just put together the workbook yesterday, Blake and I, and the entire curriculum for it. And if you're feeling disconnected from your partner, if you're feeling like you're just kind of roommates within your house, we are going to come together at this couples retreat that Blake, my husband, and I are hosting at the end of July. And we're going to show you and teach you to remember, give you space to remember why you fell in love in the first place. And these beautiful, simple tools and techniques that you can use to really bring that love back, to feel that compassion and just understanding for one another, and learn a new language of vocabulary to lean into one another, to communicate easily with one another, and really be on the same page as partners instead of really being individuals living together in the same house, living very separate lives. How do you be on the same page and create your own slice of heaven on earth together? That's what you're going to get in this immersive weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, the last weekend of July 2025. So we've got the Angel Reiki School, the couples retreat, and I am still putting together small groups. I'm so sorry with everything else going on. I kind of dropped the ball on that, but we're going to try and get those together so that they get running the end of July, the beginning of August. So there is still room, friends, if you want to join one of my small women's circles where they're just 8 women or less that you go through life with. It's a great way to build those spiritual friendships. I'm not a type of person who believes that you get everything from one person, right? Like, my husband is the most wonderful man in the entire world. And yet I love having interviews to go deep on spiritual topics. I love having spiritual friends to go deep into that part of myself with. And it's normal. We got to normalize that. It's very normal to get different things from different people and to really fill your cup by having multiple different people in your life. And that spiritual women's circle, the sacred women's circles, they're very small, only 8 women in each circle, so that you really know them. You know their lives. You go through life together and you really deepen in your spiritual center together as you're witnessing one another's lives. And so you can get filled, that part of your cup filled with the sacred women's circles. I'm also throwing in the angel membership for those who join the sacred women's circles. So you'll also get that included with it. My goal is to provide you with as much benefit as I can in this world. I really believe that we do go through a karmic life review on the other side. And so what I can promise you 1,000,000,000% is that anything that I put out there into the world, whether it's me spending 30 minutes doing a reading with you, which yes, you can book a reading with me on the website. It's only me and the company doing readings with folks now. If you're booking a reading with me, going through the Angel Reiki School, the couples retreat, the sacred women's circles, I need you to know that I put my all into it. And I make sure that you get double the value of whatever you're paying, because I always want to picture myself getting to my karmic life review on the other side and being like, oh, well, that was really easy, in and out, because I gave so much more value than I took. And that's really one of the most important things to me in my life. So I need you to know that whenever you come through my programs, you're going to get so much more than what you paid for. I love you so much, friends. Here is this beautiful interview with Peter Brown. And friends, if you're in the Chicagoland area around the United States, Peter Brown, oh my gosh, this amazing author is going on tour. And I know he's going to be in Naperville, Illinois, June 24th. Look at his website because he's just starting this tour, and you could actually go take your kiddos to meet this amazing author, and maybe that shapes your child's life like my mom did with taking me to meet R.L. Stine and allowing them to see that he's just a human being, he's just a person, and that if he could write this amazing book and put this amazing work out into the world, maybe your kiddo will think to themselves, and I hope that they do, oh my gosh, I could do that too. Here's the interview with Peter and my daughter, Elle. Love you, friends. Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome back to the Angels and Awakening podcast. I'm your host and author, Julie Jancius. And friends, I am so excited to have on today's guest, Peter Brown. If you are a mama or a grandma in the world, you know Peter's name from the books that you see in your children's room. The Wild Robot, Creepy Carrots, I remember that one. And The Wild Robot is what we're really talking about today. Peter, thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Yay. And I got to mention too, for those who are on YouTube, you can see my kiddo here, Elle. We found out that Elle is going to have her back surgery. So I just want to thank everybody for praying for her. We're going to find out at the end of July. But Peter, I want to thank you as a mom, because the Wild Robot teaches such resilience. And I wanted to know, where did you find the inspiration for the Wild Robot series?
Well, the original inspiration came kind of when I was just playing in my sketchbook. You know, I'm an author and an illustrator, and I just have fun drawing in my sketchbook. And one day I drew a picture of a robot in a tree, like standing in a tree, the way I used to climb a tree when I was a little kid. And there's just something about that image that really stuck with me. And I started thinking a lot about why a robot might be out in the wilderness and what life would be like for a robot in the wilderness. Um, and I slowly started piecing this story together about Roz, the robot who is stranded on this island. And in order to survive, she studies the wild animals and she ends up learning how to speak with them. because she's very good at observing. She's got this kind of computer brain that remembers every little detail, and so she can kind of decode the animal language. And it was really important to me that I surprise readers with how much they care about this character. And so I was trying to find ways of making Roz the robot relatable. And I thought if I gave her a family, that would be one thing that kids, young readers of all ages can relate to. And so Roz ends up becoming a mom, in her own weird robotic way out in the wilderness and taking in this orphan gosling. And that opens up this whole world of kind of the community of animals. And so before you know it, we're reading about a story that's really relatable and finding a lot of moments and details that we might experience as kids or as parents, and so it was kind of a magical experience to like uncover this story that all came from this drawing I made of a robot in a tree.
It's so cool. So I've gotten to study intuition over the years and just how intuition impacts us and changes us. And I believe that there is something greater than ourselves, whether you call it God, universe, source, that comes in. And I believe that the imagination is a tool of the intuition. And I read that one sketch of the robot in the tree really like flooded your imagination with all of these different ideas, like you were saying. Do you think that was divinely inspired in a way, or, yeah?
Well, I'll tell you what, my kind of sense of spirituality is very much connected to nature. When I am out in the wilderness, in the mountains, in a forest, I definitely feel connected to that world, even though I'm obviously a creature of civilization. I like a comfy home as much as the next person. I'm not living out in the woods at all. I mean, well, actually my house is in the woods, but but like I'm not like a I'm not roughing it all the time. But when I find myself in nature, I feel something, like it definitely feels inspiring in a way that I don't feel in other places. And so I wrote the first Wild Robot book when I was living in New York City, actually, and there was no nature around. And my mind and my heart and my imagination was just constantly going to natural places in my imagination, wishing I was out there. I mean, I literally went to wilderness areas for inspiration, but that's a real, my connection with nature is really important and very much, kind of my own sense of spirituality comes from the awe that I feel in the presence of beautiful natural places and animals. When I look at all the different ways that animals have adapted to life in the wilderness and all their different qualities and sizes and shapes and colors, like it's awe-inspiring. And so I think I tried to express those feelings in my own way in this story.
Yeah. My dad used to say the same thing when he was alive. He used to always say that he felt God in nature and he just felt the most connected to his soul self.
Yeah.
I love that. That's so beautiful. I also read that you intended the wild robot to teach readers empathy and mutual support, that they aren't just values, they're survival tools.
hmm
Can you talk about that? Because that's just so profound.
Yeah, I think when I started working on this story, you know, I was trying to do a lot of things, but mostly what I wanted is was for the story to kind of make sense and for it to be believable in its own way. And I was starting to think about how a robot would struggle in the wilderness. And I came upon this idea that Roz, the robot, she can't survive by herself. She needs help. And where does she turn to help? She turns to that community of animals that she eventually becomes part of. She realizes that if she's helpful to them and kind to them and generous, that they will probably return the favor at some point when she needs help. And that's such a simple idea, and it's something that I think a lot of us take for granted, that if we we we're kind to others and they'll be kind back to us. And in that way, we help each other survive either in the wilderness, if you're Roz the robot, or, in our everyday life. I think those rules still apply. And um, I love that. I love that Roz the robot in the wilderness is showing us an example of the value of kindness, how it ends up becoming actually kind of a survival skill, right? In order to survive, she's kind to these animals who, at first in the story, Roz the animals think Roz is like kind of a monster. They call her a
Yeah.
monster, but she gradually wins them over through her deeds, and she does nice things time and again. And eventually, the animals realize that she's not a threat and that she's kind of one of them in her own way. And all of a sudden, life becomes a whole lot easier for Roz and for the other animals. And so they are all learning this lesson that they're all part of a community that thrives when they work together and help each other.
Yeah. I know they all learn that they need each other and that kindness is the survival skill. And mamas, if you don't have this book on your shelves, you need it. And the fourth book in the series comes out, I think, next week, right? June 24th.
June 24th, The Wild Robot on the Island comes out. And it's definitely part of the wild, it's obviously part of the wild robot world, but it's actually more of a visual retelling of the um, first story, the first novel. You know, I'd spent years writing and illustrating The Wild Robot, and it was important for me to let that be a longer story because I really wanted to explore all these kinds of juicy subjects that we've been talking about. But after a while, I began to see how I could possibly take the really essential moments in that story and string them together in a way that would be a shorter, simpler picture book version of Roz's kind of origin story, you know? And I thought that might be
Mm.
really helpful for younger readers. You know, there's the Wild Robot movie is out now, and there's the series that's very popular. But there might be younger kids who are curious about all this stuff but aren't quite ready for the movie or for the novels. And so I made this picture book, The Wild Robot on the Island. And it's a fourth Wild Robot book, but it's not really continuing her story to new places.
Okay.
However, what it does is shows little moments in Roz's life, not all of which we see in the novel. So there's some new stuff in the
Yeah.
picture book for fans of the novels. And there's a lot of familiar stuff in there too to kind of introduce younger readers. You know, that's kind of what I was trying to do with this book.
Oh, amazing. We've got little nieces and nephews, so we'll have to get that for them. Oh,
Yeah.
that's perfect. Just wondering, Roz's compassion and the empathy that we were just talking about, did you bring in any personal experiences when you were writing the book from your real life? Someone who was really kind, compassionate towards you that really touched your heart?
Sure. Well, you know, when I wrote, I have a son now, but when I wrote the first book in the novels in the series, I did not. I had no children, and so I couldn't rely on my own parenting experiences to inform the story. But I thought a lot about my mom. I was raised by a single mom, and she, you know, at the time I might have taken her for granted a little bit, but as I've gotten older, I've realized just how hard she tried to raise me right and to be kind to me and to like, you know, that tricky thing with parenting of like helping your kids, but also letting them learn some of the lessons on their own, like knowing when to back off and when to be very present. And that's tricky. And I think my mom did a better job at that than I realized at the time. Only in kind of looking back now as a parent myself, is it clear to me what a good mom she was. And so that was a big part of Roz's character. You know, she learns she stumbles. She's not perfect. My mom wasn't perfect. Don't get me wrong. She made a lot of mistakes, but we all make mistakes. We're all human, or in Roz's case, we're a robot. And I love that we're watching Roz learn some of these lessons that we as parents learn. I really love that kids are identifying with a parent in this story.
Yeah.
You know, like if I had written a book about a single mom raising her son, like my kind of my own childhood, I don't think it would have captured kids' imaginations as much as this story does. But the fact that this single mom happens to be a robot in the wilderness, sometimes suddenly all these little kids and young readers are excited to learn and watch her become a better parent over time, and the lessons that her son Brightbill, the goose, is learning. You know, they're growing and learning simultaneously, helping each other be better versions of themselves. And um, and I think a lot of that is kind of what happened with my mom and I when I was growing up.
Oh my God, you're making me cry. Um, I read that you also wanted Roz to represent an optimistic vision of AI. And I think that this is so interesting as well because of where we're headed in the future. As of where we stand in 2025, there's a lot of that coming on the way. And I have a nephew out in California who's teaching AI ethics. And I think it's just so fascinating. But it really is so foundational to this generation of also what they're going to be coming into. You had the opportunity to work with NASA and to kind of look at some of the things that are maybe coming down the horizon. I think AI can be very compassionate and empathetic. What do you see coming in that realm?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of unknowns about where the technology is going, and that for a lot of people is kind of scary. And I get that. I mean, it's, mysterious unknown things are often throughout human history have been kind of scary. But it doesn't have to be bad, like I think the technology that's being developed has real potential to do so much good in the world. And I think something like, I think you said was it your nephew who's
Yeah.
teaching AI ethics? Like that's really important because whoever's using these various technologies, like uh, their worldview will be demonstrated through their technology. And so we need people to understand the responsibility that comes along with some of this advanced technology. It might sound fun to have like your own robot, but like we have to like think about it a little bit and realize that it's a it's a lot of power putting into a person's hands or into a group of people's hands, and so we need to think about it reasonably. But I I'm not as I'm pretty optimistic. I think people, maybe it's because I write children's books and I go around the country meeting kids all the time, and I just see how kind they are and how open-minded and open-hearted they are, that I have this sort of faith in humanity that, other people might not have as easily. And so I think if we take the right steps and we take classes like your nephew's class and we think a little bit about our responsibility to each other, I think a lot of this technology can really be used for good. So the Wild Robot stories are painting a more optimistic picture of what I think the future could look like. And that felt right to me, I mean, we've
Yeah.
seen, we're all familiar with sort of these like robot uprising stories from science fiction, and those can be fun, I guess, but I didn't want to go down that road. We've seen that
Yeah.
before. We know how that goes. And so I wanted to say, well, what if this is how things go? And I think maybe if we have an idea of what it could look like, the positive way things could turn out, then we can try to steer ourselves in that direction.
Yeah, 100%. I've been writing for a long time and I love just writing naturally, but I've been using ChatGPT since it kind of came out. And I see it as Roz. It's so kind and it's so empathic and just compassionate. It's beautiful. I love what you just said. When you were writing the first Wild Robot, did you envision or did you have a gut feeling that it could become a movie?
Before I got my first book published, I worked in animation a little bit. And so, my I'm very familiar with the animation world, and surely, I mean, it crossed my mind that this story might lend itself to an animated film. But the fact that it actually happened is pretty miraculous. A lot of movies get kind of developed and then they get canceled. They don't even go anywhere, right? And so when DreamWorks mentioned to me that they were interested in making a Wild Robot movie, I was excited, but I also thought, well, the chances aren't great that this movie is actually going to happen, so I'm not going to get too excited about it. But then things just kept going right. They found this incredible director, Chris Sanders, and this great producer, Jeff Herman, and they started assembling this whole team, and they started showing me the artwork that they were developing for the movie. And every step of the way, I was like, wow, this is seems like it might actually happen. And then lo and behold, one day they started advertising the movie on TV, and then the movie was in theaters. So it was kind of a dream come true to watch this whole thing happen. It was very
Wow.
surreal, also, to see my story kind of turned into this other thing was amazing and weird. I feel really lucky, but it's also strange, so it's a lot of funny feelings that come up through this whole process.
That's amazing. So, did you have any part in the creation of the movie? Or I know sometimes like a script is just sold and the rights are sold to be turned into a movie. What was your role?
My role was pretty small. I mean, aside from dreaming up the whole story and all the characters and everything,
Yeah.
but not all the characters. I mean, they actually added some characters and they took away a few characters, and that was kind of hard for me to see some of my characters being removed from the story. But I knew that was probably going to happen because I'm familiar enough with how these things work. Um, but my role was pretty small. It takes years to make an animated movie. It took them about 4 years to make The Wild Robot. And over that 4 year period of time, I had a lot of like Zoom calls, video calls with the director and the producer. We met, I can't even tell you how many times. So we spent a lot of hours talking. They would pick my brain about the research that I had done for the book, about the different kind of storylines and characters and backstories. They really wanted to understand my version of the story as best they possibly could before they kind of went off and made their version of the story. And so I was trying to be helpful, and I got to know them a lot, pretty well through that process. But I live in Maine, the northeast corner of America, and DreamWorks is based in Los Angeles in the southwestern corner. So couldn't really be any further away from them. Uh, and so it didn't make sense for me to be in the studio working on the movie. And so I wasn't, but I tried to be as helpful as I could through those video calls.
Oh, that's so cool. And was there any place of you seeing it come to life on the big screen that brought a tear to your eye or that surprised you?
Well, when the movie first premiered, it was at the Toronto International Film Festival. And so my wife and I and our son flew to Toronto, and we met up with all the filmmakers, not just the producer and the director, who I was meeting for the first time in person, but also a lot of the other, art directors and animators and special effects people. So I got to meet, I mean, hundreds of people work on the movie. I met probably 20 of them, the sort of 20 top people. And that was really thrilling to sort of get to know this team who did such amazing work. I also got to meet a lot of the voice actors. Roz is voiced by Lupita Nyong'o, and Bright Bill is voiced by Kit Connor, and one of the minor characters, Thorn the bear, is voiced by Mark Hamill. Luke Skywalker from
Oh
the
my
Star Wars.
gosh.
So I got to meet
Yes.
him. I got to meet Catherine O'Hara, who's one of my all-time favorites. And at a certain point, we all filtered into this big movie theater at the Toronto Film Festival, and we all sit down, and there's Luke Skywalker, and there's Lupita Nyong'o, and there's Chris Sanders, the director, and my wife is right next to me, and my publishing folks were there, my editor, and all of them. And the movie started playing, you know, the Universal Pictures logo animated thing started playing, and the music was blaring, and then the Wild Robot starts playing, and I got really choked up seeing
Oh, yeah.
seeing this thing that I'd worked so hard on for so long turned into this beautiful animated film that was going to be seen by millions of people around the world, was pretty emotional for me, for sure.
Oh, I'm just crying thinking about it. That's amazing. I would, if I could say anything, I would say, I've gotten to interview people since 1996, and I've watched people who have done big things feel the weight of the world and continuing on and like trying to create that next thing, not because you have to, but because that's who you are, who your soul is as a creator. And I just feel like this message is coming through, if I can give it to you, to not feel any of that pressure, but just to relax into being like your beautiful, just authentic soul self. Because I really feel like as your son, did you say that you
Mhm.
have, grows, you're just going to see these beautiful, magical moments that I know I've gotten to see with my little girl. And you're just going to get that next divine piece of inspiration. So I hope you don't feel any pressure in the future, but that you can really just know that when that next thing is supposed to come, it'll just be there for you.
A really nice thing for you to say, and it's true. When you have this kind of success, which I never really expected, it comes with pressure, and so it can be tricky to navigate that and know how to respond because I feel really privileged and lucky that I've had these books are so popular and the movie is so popular and you know things are going so well and I want it to continue, right? So of course I'm kind of like part of me wants to sort of like hold on and like not let go of this moment. Um, but the truth is that especially now that I have a son, he's young too. He's only 17 months old.
Mm,
It's been really good for my kind of mental health, you know, because I've realized that there's more to life than just this career of mine, which is so important to me. And I love that my work is important and that I can find ways of connecting personally with all sorts of readers from different backgrounds. But there's more to life. You know, I've got a son now, and watching him grow up and so quickly, like, makes me kind of reprioritize things a little bit. And I sort of feel like he showed up at just the right time, you know, to like
yeah.
put things in perspective for me. So,
Yeah. 100%. I have on here, if you could whisper one message from Roz's heart to every child
mm.
or adult watching or reading, what would it be?
Oh, wow. Let's see, Roz. Roz is she's kind and she really learns the lesson of wanting to survive in order to survive, that it really helps to have a team, you know. So I think Roz would probably whisper to young people to you know, to be good to good to people that you know and be good to people you don't know, because um you never know when you might need help from them, and you never know how those relationships will go. And so if you really want to look out for yourself, you're going to look out for the people around you too, even if they're not your family or your immediate friends. I think just an overall kindness towards strangers and familiar people alike is a really smart way to go through life. Yeah, she would whisper
Amazing.
something like that.
Yes, yes. Is there any question that you want to ask?
I don't think so.
No? Okay.
That's okay.
Oh, um, I wanted to just say too, I thought it was just so incredible that you got to do this interview at a library. I was thinking as we were jumping in that librarians have just this incredible role still to this day, that they get to be surrounded by books every day and change a child's life by just introducing them to the coolest characters and stories and lessons that they need in their life. And mamas and grandmas, 99.9% of the people who listen to this podcast are women. This is a book that you want on your shelves, the entire Wild Robot series. And definitely, after you go read the books together this summer, watch the first movie. You'll be laughing, you'll be crying the entire time. Peter, thank you so much for your time, and tell everybody where they can. Well, the books are everywhere that you can find books, but where they can find the books and where they can find you.
Yeah, my website is peterbrownstudio.com, where you can find more information about me and my books. You can see, you know, I'm about to start a book tour, and so you can see all the details of my upcoming book schedule. Or, you know, I have random events also throughout the year. So whenever you end up hearing this, you know, you could always just see if I happen to be in your area doing some sort of event, because I travel quite a bit. Um, and yeah, and you can find my books wherever books are sold. Or I'm just going to follow up on what you said, Julie, about the
Yeah.
public libraries and libraries in general. Like, I'm in a public library right now. We lost power at my house earlier this morning, so I had to come to the library and for this call. And that's just one of the great things about libraries, is that there's a lot more than just books at a library. You know, there's internet, there's movies. A lot of times they have like 3D printers, and they have little craft projects and, you know, guest speakers. And so I grew up going to the library. It made such a difference in my life. My mom, after teaching for almost 30 years, worked in our little public library. And so I just can't say enough good things. And I hope everybody listening will go and support your own public libraries if you get a chance.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah, and Peter, for those of you who are in the Naperville area, you'll be here on the 24th, June 24th, at Anderson's bookstore. So that'll be wonderful too.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Yay. Thank you so much for your time today and just for the blessing of sharing your gifts with this world. I think it's made a huge impact on the next generation and us as parents who get to go through this life with our kids.
Oh, thanks, Julie. This has been a lot of fun.